Chapter 17. Dressed in regular clothes, Philip looked even more fragile than he had in his pajamas. His spindly arms poked out of his short-sleeved shirt, and a belt was cinched tightly around his pants. "He won't like me," Philip said. "He might like you if you don't act like a monster," Rue replied. She reached over and adjusted his collar so that his jutting collarbone didn't show. "I don't see why he won't come up here and meet me." His voice turned peevish. "He's shy of people," Rue explained. She had told Philip only that she was going to take him to meet Jack. She hadn't mentioned the garden at all. Philip's moods were so unpredictable that she worried he would throw a fit when he learned that the garden had been there all along, abandoned and left to die. It would be safer, she reasoned, for him to see it for himself, out of earshot. "Do you remember what to say to Miss Valentine?" "I think so." He pressed the buzzer on his nightstand. Miss Valentine was at the door so quickly that Rue worried she had been just outside the whole time, listening. Her face revealed nothing, though, as Philip gave her instructions. "I'm teaching Rue how to play chess today, and we are not to be disturbed." "You're dressed," Miss Valentine said with surprise. "I made him get dressed," Rue cut in quickly. "I was sick of seeing him in his pajamas." Miss Valentine ignored her and studied Philip's face. "Shouldn't you rest? You've had a difficult night." "I'm fine," he said. "Your eyes look a little bloodshot." "My eyes are my business," he snapped at her. "Now leave us alone. If you bother us again, you'll make me mad, and I'll tell my father when he gets back." Miss Valentine hesitated, then glanced at Rue suspiciously before she left the room. "She won't bother us now," he told Rue. "I don't know how she doesn't hate you," Rue said, half marveling. "I would." "My father pays her not to hate me," he said simply. He started for the door, but Rue stopped him. "Not that way," she said. "We're going through here." Rue led him through the door that opened out to the secret passageway, stopping by the chute. With the toe of her sneaker, she gave it a little tap. "That's our way down," she told him. Philip looked at the dark chute apprehensively. "I used to throw candy wrappers down it. Where does it go?" "All the way down to the basement." Rue got down on the floor and went into the chute. Feet first, careful this time to brace her legs against the edges to keep herself from sliding down. She looked up at Philip. "Come on, I'll hold on to you." Philip crouched down and adjusted his legs so that they were resting over her shoulders. She wrapped her arms around his calves, then pulled them both forward into the mouth of the chute. "Ready?" she asked. "I guess so," Philip said, his voice faltering. Relaxing her legs, Rue let herself slide with Philip sliding behind her. When they began to pick up speed, Rue heard him make a small sound as if he were trying to stifle a scream. Quickly she pressed her legs against the side again to stop them. "All right up there?" she asked. "Yes." "You sound funny." She tried to twist her head to look up at him, but in that small space, it was close to impossible. "It's just that," Philip said. "It feels... I've never moved so fast." "Do you want me to slow down?" "No. I want to go faster." Rue laughed, then wrapped her arms around his legs more tightly. "You asked for it." She let go and they sped downward at full speed, their backs skimming across the cool metal. It was nearly as thrilling as Dumbfounder's current. The two of them laughed helplessly the whole way down, right up until they reached the bottom. And there was Jack, waiting there, looking bemused. "Sounded like the walls were laughing," he said. Rue shimmied to the floor so fast Philip slid onto the platform awkwardly, his legs strangely splayed. The smile left his face and his eyes darted toward Jack ruefully, as if he were waiting for an insult. But Jack had experience with creatures that were mistrustful of him. "I'm Jack." He put his hand up for Philip to shake. Philip took it, and Jack gave him a discreet tug, just enough so that Philip could ease himself into a sitting position, and then slip off the platform. His dignity recouped, Philip now looked at Jack carefully, taking in the odd clothes, the pale hair in its short ponytail. "Where's Sir?" Philip asked. "Just outside." Jack nodded his head towards the basement door. "I'd like to see him," Philip said, and started for the door, but Rue grabbed him by the wrist. "Not yet. We wanted to show you something else first," she said. She let him past the wired panel, and he followed her up the narrow stairs with Jack behind him. Rue pushed open the trap door, and they all scrambled up into the garden. "It's still here," Philip murmured as he looked around. Rue braced herself for an outburst. Jack moved up beside him, his hands in his pocket, his body looking deliberately relaxed. He's trying to keep him calm, Rue realized, like he did with the mink on the shoal. But the crying and shrieking that Rue had expected never came. Instead, Philip began to walk through the garden, looking up at the towering trees and the lacy brown creepers clinging to the glass panes, at the bare patches of earth and the small hummocks of leaf litter that Rue and Jack had piled in the corner. "It used to be all green," he said finally, "with flowers everywhere." He stepped into the stone path and began to walk along it. "This was the stream." "We thought it was a footpath," Rue said. "No, a stream. There were berry bushes that grew along here." He paused to run his hand over a skeletal bush, then followed the stream to its end at the base of the rocky ledge below the boulder. Gazing up, he said, "And this is where the waterfall was. There are pipes in the stones." "I didn't see them," Rue said. "They're hidden. Look." He hopped out of the stream bed and scrambled up the slope, his spidery body clambering over the rocks. When he got to the top, he pointed to the tiny metal pipes embedded in the stone. He showed them other things too, like the fissures in the rocks, where flowers grew, and where the banana tree once stood, parsing it all out, just as he had done with his skeletons. And in a way, Rue thought, all that was left of the garden was its bones, and a bat squeak of life beneath the soil. Philip stopped talking suddenly. His head lifted as though he were listening. Then he turned to them, smiling. A small, quiet smile of relief. "What is it?" Rue asked. "She's here," he said. They found another bucket for Philip, though he wasn't strong enough to carry it full. At first, Sir startled at the sight of Philip. He spread his wings and scrambled in the air, flying to a nearby tree. But soon he grew used to him. As the stately bird patrolled the shallow waters for fish, he ventured closer. Once, Philip reached out and very quickly let his fingertips brush against the bird's wing while Sir kept perfectly still, his round yellow eyes fixed on Jack. After an hour of watering, Philip grew tired. He stretched out on the boulder above the waterfall and rested his head on his flung-out arm while Rue and Jack kept working. Soon he lay so still that Rue went up to the boulder to check on him. Philip's body had shifted so that it fit against the contours of the rock more comfortably. His right hip had found a depression to lean into, and his right foot had slipped into a narrow crack in the lowest part of the rock. Rue put a hand to his cheek. His skin was cool and dry. He was breathing peacefully, fast asleep. Satisfied that he was okay, they left him so they could cool off in the river. They went down into the hidden cove and poured bucketfuls of water over each other's heads, while Sir paced the banks, watching them skeptically. Even before they re-entered the garden, Rue knew something was wrong. The door to the basement was slightly ajar when she was sure she had shut it tightly. As she and Jack climbed the ladder to the trapdoor, a sickish feeling began to fill her belly. "Someone's here," she whispered to Jack. A shadow passed across the open trapdoor, and they heard footsteps above them. "Maybe Philip's awake," Jack said. Slowly, Rue climbed to the top of the stairs and peered into the garden to see a pair of long, jean-clad legs. "Oh, Rue," Violet murmured. She glanced over at Philip, still asleep on the boulder. "What were you thinking?" "He wanted to come," Rue cried. "He was happy. He was laughing. I've never heard him laugh like that." "Yes, I heard him too. I heard the both of you, though. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out where the laughter was coming from. It was when I poked around outside and saw the trampled grass by the basement door that I put it together." Violet shook her head. "What have you done?" Rue. I've been trying to make things better. Better? What you made is a colossal mess. Can't you see that? Can't you see the harm you've done? Your uncle shut the garden up for a reason. What reason? Rue countered combatively. Because he killed his wife? Mrs. Wixton said people think he did. I know what people think. And I know people who think it. They have all sorts of other nonsense to say, too. If they had to mind their own business for a full week, they would give themselves hernias, every last one of them. Then why did he shut up the garden? Rue demanded. I don't know, but that's not our concern, is it? What you should be concerned about is what will happen when your uncle comes back to find you've opened the garden up and brought Philip down here too. I wouldn't be surprised if he tossed us all out. Then you can't tell him, Jack said. He had been hidden from Violet's view, behind Rue on the stairs. At the sound of this unfamiliar voice, Violet's eyes narrowed. Who's with you? She asked. Rue said nothing, but an urgent tap on her back persuaded her to climb up into the garden so that Jack could do the same. At the sight of him, Violet caught her breath. She looked at Rue, then at Jack, then back at Rue. It is him, isn't it? Rue nodded. Violet smiled and put the back of her hand against her mouth, as though to hide it. She shook her head. If the donkey grannies could see this. Violet glanced back and forth at the two of them. Even if I keep your secret, and I'm not saying I will, you'll get caught sooner or later. Miss Valentine doesn't miss much, and if she doesn't guess, Philip is bound to spill the beans during some tantrum. Incidentally, how are you planning to sneak Philip back in the house? I was going to wait until 11, when Miss Valentine goes to choke Cherry for the mail, and then tell you that Philip wanted his lunch. And while I'm fixing it, you sneak him back upstairs. Rue nodded. The nerve of you two, but she seemed more amused than angry. Her eyes returned to Jack, and she shook her head. The Fane here in our house. The donkey grannies would keel over. They'd never believe me, even if I swore up and down and around the bend. Then Jack did the most astonishing thing. From his back pocket he pulled out a knife and opened it. Grabbing the top of his ponytail, he sawed at the hair above the rubber band, and in a minute he held out his blonde ponytail toward Violet. Show them this, Jack said. His hair was now short and jaggedy. It made him look more like a regular sort of boy, the kind that Rue might have seen on the streets in Limpet. Violet stared down at the flaxen thing. Is this a bribe? She asked, raising her eyebrow at Jack. Yes, he answered, smiling. To Rue's relief, she could see the Fane again in his smile. So apparently did Violet. All right. She reached out and took the ponytail. I'll keep your secret. Thank you, Violet, Rue said. Violet nodded, her eyes still on Jack. You look real enough, she mused. You can squeeze me if you want, he said. Well then, I think I will. She gave him a hug, and when she let him go, she said, Mind you, that was for my mother's sake. She thinks you're nothing but a boy who needs a home, and she'd plunk me on the head if I didn't say, Patty McPhail, Donkey Island, first house on the left, on Quarry Street. Done. With that, she walked up to the gardens and climbed to fetch Philip. As soon as she bent to wake him, she paused, her head tipped to one side as she stared at the boulder. How pretty, she said. What is? Rue asked, hurrying over with Jack behind her. That little red flower, Violet said. I didn't know flowers could grow on rocks like that. Indeed, growing out of a narrow crack in the boulder by Philip's foot was a spiky red flower where Rue was quite sure there hadn't been one before.